My name is Gavin Evans, and this is my ranking of Black Mirror Season 3 from worst to best. And this video will have spoilers, so there's your warning. But this show is very hit or miss. I don't think it's as good as people say, but let's get into it with the worst episode. And I'm fully aware this is a hot take. My opinion is going to piss people off, and I don't really care, but the worst episode is San Junipero, which is a lesbian romance episode, and I'm very open about this, but that's just not my thing. My two favorite stories of all time are Last of Us Part 2 and Arcane. Both stories do have a lesbian romance, but it's in addition to a much larger story. While here, the lesbian romance is the point. It gets all the attention, and yes, I'm not for it, but it's just not a story I'm interested in watching. It just feels like the mandatory LGBT episode, and I don't think it had much to offer beyond that. I don't think it has anything to say on human connection and love. In fact, everything this episode is trying to say, I'm fundamentally against, because it's trying to come across like euthanasia is good, and I fundamentally disagree. I think life has value, I think life has purpose, and the fact that someone who is disabled wants to kill themselves, I think sends a really bad message, while this episode seems to romanticize it. So this episode just has nothing to offer me. I don't care about the main romance. I do not care about anything this episode is saying. I don't think the acting was all that good. The one thing I will give this episode is that it captures the aesthetics of whatever time period it is perfectly. But beyond that, there's not anything else to this episode. The worst episode of season 3 is Hated in the Nation, and this episode was hated by me. I just found it boring. I watched it a few days ago and I already forgot everything about it. Princess Moada from Brave is in it. Wong makes an appearance. There's some kind of hashtag going around, and there's this like mystery involving bees, and I honestly forget everything regarding it. It was just bland, the longest episode yet, which was really unneeded. And yeah, I really despise this episode. There's nothing in it that pissed me off, so it doesn't come in dead last, but it was actually really close between the two episodes. The next worst episode is Playtest. And this episode was just really disappointing because it's directed by Dan Trachtenberg, who directed this great Porter short. He directed 10 Cloverfield Lane, a movie that I love. He also did Prey, which I didn't really care for, and now he did this. And look, like, this is overlong, it's cliche, it's predictable as can be, and it just did nothing for me. Whenever a show or movie's trying to be like, what's real, what's not, I just always assume everything's not real until the end, and I just didn't think anything about the storytelling here was effective. The one movie in recent years that's done this well is Oculus, but everything else just... It's just an overdone cliche at this point. I thought the CGI was bad. I thought it was lacking in any bit of tension or atmosphere. I don't think White Russell gives that good of a performance, so yeah, it's the third worst episode of season 3. The next worst episode is Men Against Fire, which I'm very mixed on because I actually think the ending twist of this episode is brilliant. It is dark, it is disturbing, it is horrific. But man, getting to that point was boring as hell. Like, I had zero investment in this Watch's storyline. I didn't think it was thrilling or tense. I didn't think it did anything for me. And then we get to the ending and I'm like, oh my goodness, that is like brilliant and just like horrific. But is it worth the 40 minutes prior? I don't think so. I do think the very end is good as well when the main character remembers the events, but for how they actually were. But it's just really boring up until the final reveal. So that's why it's the fourth worst. Now, the top two episodes are one I would say I legitimately liked. The second best episode of season 3 is Nosedive, aka Mama Beans but with black meal. This episode provides nothing new. You've seen stories like it before, but I do like everything it's trying to say about how social media and caring about what people think just makes us inauthentic, just creates these fake personalities. And I like how this one character kills so much at the start, but by the end she couldn't kill less. And she might be locked up, but she's never been more free. All of that really works for me. The story as a whole, it's a bit generic. I thought the ending at the wedding was a bit unsatisfying. And it does feel contrived here and now, like the plane getting cancelled last second. I don't know if I bought that, but everything this episode says, I like. And I think actually in a day dominated by social media, it's important. Authenticity and honesty and just being your real self, I think, is important lesson. So yeah, but my favorite episode, and I'm going to be honest, not a single other episode came close to this one. This is the best episode of the entire show so far. It is the only perfect episode, and it's Shut Up and Dance. Shut up and dance with me. Well, let's begin with the performances. Alex Lothar, who I love from End of the Fucking World, gives another great performance here. Jerome Flynn, who plays Bronn in Game of Thrones, I think is also great. And for like 90% of this episode, I was just like, okay, this is a really good thriller. You know, you feel on edge, you care for the main character, and you just feel so bad for him because he's just this naive kid. So when we get to the last few minutes, well, it turns out just how despicable this main character actually is. It just feels like a punch to the gut. It recontextualizes the rest of the episode. Well, you're just shooken up. And like the amount of rage on display, realizing that you were rooting for an evil piece of shit, just wow. And there's one performance I want to highlight here, and it's Camilla Powell, who only had one job, and that one job was to yell at Kenny over the phone. And she just does it in such a hard-hitting, emotional manner, and gave this episode its weight. When she said, "It's kids. Tell me it's not kids." You just felt the devastation in her voice, and it just makes you realize just you don't know who someone is behind closed doors. You don't know what secrets people lie. Whether it's someone close to you or someone you see at a restaurant, you just don't know. And this episode just highlights the worst of humanity in a very effective manner, and I love how despite everything the characters went through, the truth still comes out, and it should. The characters all got what was coming to them. And the Radiohead song is the perfect note for this episode to end on. This was thrilling, intense, and entertaining for so much of it, but it ends with a brutal gut punch, and it's one I've thought about for like a week now. I think it is an incredible hour of television, and that's why it's easily not just my favorite episode of this season, but of the first 3 seasons altogether. But What are your favorite and least favorite episodes of Season 3? Let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Stay tuned for more videos soon. And Gavin, out.